Hi, welcome back. Today, Max and I are going to fight.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be talking about something new to hit the markets. We're going to be talking about Jack Daniel's Rye.
Go ahead, pick a side.
I already picked mine. What about you? So, Jack Daniels. When you think American whiskey, what do you think?
Beam.
Beam? Well, most of the world thinks Jack Daniels.
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do. But, interestingly enough, Jack Daniels does not think of themselves as a bourbon whiskey. They are Tennessee whiskey, and there's a very distinct difference for that. They're made in Tennessee.
Yes, primarily.
Also, they do a charcoal filtration process known to them as the Lincoln County process, where all of their whiskey is filtered through a charcoal mellow and filtered before it is barreled. Right? Or is it before it's bottled? It's before it's barreled.
Before it's barreled. My understanding of it. As does Dickel, the other Tennessee whiskey that is known.
So, Jack Daniels as a distillery was established in 1866 by the eponymous Jack Daniels, who learned how to distill whiskey from a moonshiner and an African-American slave named Uncle Nearest, who is now finally getting the credit he deserves. There's actually a brand named after him, and Jack has recognized his contributions to their history as well. The bottle most people are familiar with would probably be the Jack Daniel Old Number 7.
Old 7.
Which, depending on which whiskey myth you want to believe, was the original registration number for Jack's distillery by the U.S. government. That distillery registration changed, but he decided to keep the Old Number 7 on the label because the branding is strong.
Which I think is a legitimate story. I mean, that seems pretty reasonable. A lot of these things are so far in the past and not documented. Who knows? That seems like the most.
Well, the best thing about stories about drinking is they're all being told by drunks. So, if you are the largest American whiskey in the world, and you will pretty much make one product, and now you're hitting a whiskey phenomenon, boom, craze all over the world, across the country, what do, Max?
Put in more expensive bottles.
What else do you do?
Make a rye.
Yeah, rye whiskey. Rye whiskey, the original American whiskey, has seen a resurgence in the past decade, and not to be left behind, Jack Daniels has started making their own, which has got a good story to go along with it on its own. Unlike, you want to get into this a little bit?
Well, you know what? I really like what they're doing as far as like the mash bills, because mash bills tend to get, everybody kind of does the same thing. We either have
just as a quick refresher, mash bills for everyone joining us is the grains that make up your whiskey distillate. So you're making a beer out of grain, and then you're distilling it. So for bourbon whiskey, it's corn, rye, and barley usually. For rye, we're flipping that around, so it's mostly rye, corn, and barley. In the case of Jack Daniel's Rye, we've got 70% rye, 18% corn, and 12% malted barley.
Right, and most of them, the big old Kentucky boys, are doing 51-ish% on rye, so barely legal rye. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these new guys that are coming along, so as not to compete directly with that, are doing 95 to 100% rye.
Well, the 95% rye are coming out of, a lot of times, out of LDI/MGP, which was sourced whiskey, which that rye was originally designed to be blended into other products, other Seagram's products, to create as a flavoring component. It just turns out that when well made and well aged, that style of rye is very tasty on its own as well.
It's great. But also a lot of the new guys that are distilling their own to not compete directly with the big guys are also doing 100% rye, and it's a completely different flavor.
Yeah.
So there aren't that many that I can name that are doing somewhere in the middle of those two with a 70, and certainly none of them are doing the Tennessee style where they do a charcoal filtration.
Right, and that's the thing to note about this bottle as well. Unlike a lot of the ryes out there, the only one I can think of that would compare that would be Dickel, which is again a sourced rye whiskey going through the
not the same category.
Yeah. Jack is sticking with their charcoal mellowing on this. And this also isn't their first foray into rye. If you've been paying attention for the past several years, Jack's actually been releasing kind of the experimentation process of getting to this rye over the past few years. It started with an unaged rye about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah,
then
which was great because it was the same juice, and we were able as consumers to taste it if you found it at the time.
Yeah.
As that process takes place.
Yeah, and then they started releasing it as various aging points. Last year they did a single barrel version of it as well. The problem with those were always, not only were they harder to find, but they were also not necessarily very good. They weren't finished.
They weren't
not
done.
Good isn't the word. They weren't finished,
They weren't done.
but they were also rather expensive.
Yes.
Here we're talking about a bottle of anywhere, well, it's over 4 years old, we know, because there's no age statement on it.
Right.
So it's aged for a minimum of 4 years. And it's under $30 for a bottle. So we're dealing with something that's got higher rye content than most places, that's then charcoal mellowed, and then aged for a little bit longer than what we're used to. So,
For my money, I feel it's a good value.
well,
Let's drink.
what does your mouth feel, Max?
Depending on the time of night.
I don't want to know.
You see, for me, I get really sweet notes up front. I kind of get bubblegum up front.
There's going to be a lot of people on the internet very mad at you for saying that.
They don't like gum?
They don't like gum.
Those people.
Bubblegum usually
Gum
means...
is great. Gum's American.
But, well, I'll argue that the way that a lot of people use that term, they are arguing that that is a term that means there's something wrong in the distillation process. So,
Well, let's
I
take a little
understand your...
snobbiness out of it.
I,
Because I think some of that was where that comes from. And look, this part of what I love discussing about this one is we don't always agree, and both opinions have value, and it's okay.
Mine has more value, but I don't have the hat though. But you're right. There is an intrinsic sweetness up top here. I always associate Jack Daniel's with a little bit of banana runs. And this has more of a, as you said earlier before we started filming, kind of almost a banana Foster feel, more of a roasted, toasted feel to it.
Once I get my nose out of it and I'm tasting it,
why don't we taste
those
it?
Round, burnt banana. It's that caramelized sugar sort of banana that I like. And honestly, my normal spot for ryes is big, mean, overproof, have a safe word, have a driver lined up. I like those. If I'm drinking something light and this is round and friendly, this is really nice. I have no problem with that, and I think it's also great if somebody's getting into ryes. I don't know that I'm going to introduce them immediately to something big and aggressive and mean. And I mean mean in a good way. I think this is very open. It's very, appeal to a wider audience. And
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, look, this to me tastes like Jack Daniel's, but spicier. There's the intrinsic through line of that Lincoln County process that is inherent in the product, which isn't a bad thing. That's
It's
Jack
the
Daniel's.
advantage and the disadvantage. If you like Jack, you like
Yeah.
Jack. And like you said, there are more Jack Daniels drinkers in the world, and that customer loyalty is fucking amazing. People love their brand.
They absolutely do. And this is a rye for Jack Daniel's drinkers. It's a little bit spicy.
Amen.
So I'm highly amused that the rye is a higher proof than the regular Old
Right?
Number 7 at a solid 90 proof, so it actually has a little bit more utility to it. I slightly disagree about whether or not I would use this as an introduction to rye for people, though, because while it has a place and it has a uniqueness to it, I don't necessarily know that it is characteristic of the product. I might start
get
with
that.
more of an Overholt or something that wild turkey that moves into that full rye flavor, and then
Here's
offer
what
this
rye
as something
is,
along the lines.
And here's our spectrum.
Now, that being said, I think that this is also well designed for people who want to do shots. Clearly, it's more mellow, it's easier drinking. Look, the pure fact of the matter is, anytime you do any kind of filtration, you're stripping something out. So
Right.
you are making a product that is more mellow, but you're also taking off some of the aspects that we like to use for cocktails or mixing.
Character.
And it's definitely add character back in. I wouldn't, not
Right.
deficit of character, but
Right, but there's different notes.
it's like
it's letting these notes shine.
it's like the teenager grew up, went off to college, found themselves, and now realize that they're a liberal.
I didn't follow that.
Anyway, so that's the Jack Daniel's rye. As you can tell, we're a bit divided on it. It's clearly got a place. If you like Jack, it's a rye built for you. And I'm sure Max would love to talk with you about it more next Tuesday here at
Max's Corner at the Chestnut Club.
And I will yell into the void of the internet with you at bottledandbondla.com. Or if you want to come visit me, come see me at the Nomad Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. So until next time.
Drink.